I consider her an expert in early literacy, and
I know
I'm
a
really
few
excited about what she has to share today.
Are you a brainiac?
I am not a brainiac at all. I know a few things about the brain, that's it. But Jane and I were talking just before this, and I was like, anytime you do anything for 28 years, you're bound to learn a few things. So like over the years, I just feel really lucky that I've been able to learn the kinds of things that I've been able to learn. And now with literacy, just being able to kind of put my foot into doing more teacher leader professional development and things like that. So I'm excited that I get to talk with all of you today. So you're probably wondering, like, I think Jana put something out, or Jana and Karen did, about like what this would be about. And there have been conversations that we've been having in the district and across just about the importance of foundational literacy and how really you guys have a really important job in kindergarten through second grade and then our special, I know we have some special ed teachers here too, right? Yeah, okay. Because what our kids gain and are able to do moving forward really depends on the foundation that you're giving them in K through 2. And it's really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then a little bit also about, then we have so many layers with these kids that we work with. And the fact that these layers are sorted out sometimes easily and sometimes over time. It takes time to sort things out. So we'll dive into that a little bit. What I hope to be able to add thinking with you about today is the fact that because I am the Read and Recover teacher leader, I work with 8 other districts. So I don't just know Oshkosh, I know a little bit about these other districts as well. And then we have 35 schools that I get to, and each school is different. And then we have like 60 teachers. So each teacher I have works with a group of different people. So the fact is, I come away from all of that knowing that like really we have a lot the same, but yet we have a lot different. What we have that's the same is that we all are working hard at student growth. Like we all want to see students succeed. We all are working our tails off to try and get that to happen. But what's different is how we do it and the systems we have in place within our schools, and then sometimes the outcomes based on that. So I feel like privileged a little bit to see like, oh, that's working well. Tell me more about that in your school, because then I maybe can help support other people in thinking about things. So hopefully by the time you guys leave today, we can just have some conversation, or you can be doing some thinking about what systems are in place here, even at Franklin, and what do you have as far as a piece of that, okay? And adding to the outcomes of all students that you worked with. So, all right, so slide 2. So I talked a little bit about the fact that there are layers. And when we think about what we have control over as teachers, we really have control over like curriculum delivery, which is one piece, okay? We have, and in curriculum delivery, that means we have like the manuals in front of us. We have the what to teach in front of us. And we might know how to do that, but that's where our other colleagues come into play, okay? So we have coaches in the building, or we even have collaborative meetings in teams, or we have our special ed folks who also have knowledge about kids who learn differently. We have our EL teachers who have that expertise. So we have a lot of experts that if we use them really effectively, it can be a really strong system, okay? So implementation of curriculum is like, I have the manuals in front of me. It's the what I'm going to teach students. How I teach that really is dependent on the knowledge base I have. The other piece that's kind of exciting is there are a lot of teachers here who reach out and do more learning. So like some of you have been part of literacy acquisitions. Some of you are going to do some training in literacy lessons in the future, which is more about literacy. And you read books and you provide or you attend other professional developments. I'm sure that you all reach out in different ways to refine your craft of how to do the what, okay? Then the third piece of the layer of curriculum delivery is like knowing why you're doing what you're doing. To me, that's a piece that's missing a lot. And it's because we're really busy and we have like, okay, so give me this curriculum. This is what I need to teach. And maybe tell me a little bit about how, but we don't have as much time to think about why we're doing what we're doing. And if we know the why part of it, the rest makes more sense. And I'm able to adapt and be responsive to the curriculum to meet the needs of my students better, okay? So when I look at districts that I'm working with and I'm thinking about how they're implementing curriculum, outcomes are better when we have responsive teachers who really are thinking about the why, learning more about the how to do the what. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's one layer is curriculum, and we all have a piece of that for sure. The other really important layer is the students, okay? And that sometimes gets us bogged down. We have unique individual students who can challenge us in our thinking about curriculum delivery, right? We have students who we're doing all things that we know how to do, and then we get stuck. All right, so it's really important when we're thinking about that layer that we start to have an asset-minded focus. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later because the schools that I've worked with who have these higher outcomes are really looking at these students with this asset-minded focus. Okay, so I'm going to get into that in a bit. But basically, I wanted to show you that these are the layers that we see. We have us, and we have our students. Okay, we have control over the us, and the more we know about the students, the better we do. Okay, all right. So moving ahead. Oh, I wanted to share one more thing before you go to that slide. So, like, some of you have been around a little bit longer, but do you remember the whole conversation about learning styles? You know, like this person is kinesthetic, this person is auditory learner, this person. Okay, so I'm thinking about all of the different kinds of things I've learned in the 28 years that I've been in education, and I took bit from each of them. You know, like nothing is bad that I've learned. It's just over the years you start to think more, and the more students you work with, you start to go, okay, so this fits them, but not really. So when I now think about those learning styles based on all the students that I've had in front of me, I think about really students are not one or the other, okay? They might have a little bit more strength if I do more auditory, but I never really learned how to assess a student for which learning style they were. It was just, we were given the information that this is the case. They have different learning styles. But I want us to think about students as having different paths. Each student has a different path. And maybe at one point they are more of an auditory learner, but that doesn't mean that's the way they are forever. Okay, so we just have to look at each student as an individual and think about the fact that there is a path that they're on and it might look different than this path. Okay, all right, so moving forward from there, now I want to share about one student that in thinking about these paths and thinking about the unique individual stories that each student has. I know your classes are like made up of probably 23, 25 different student unique needs. And so to sort all that out for each one can be a challenge. But I want to talk to you about a little girl that I worked with, not at that school anymore, but she in kindergarten had a typical kindergarten instruction. She had typical kindergarten instruction. And I was a reading recovery teacher at the time. So when she came to first grade, obviously I learned, because I had to pick her up for reading recovery. I didn't have to. I picked her up for reading recovery, and she came in with significant needs. Now, she happened to be a student with who was an English language learner. Okay, so I knew that was, she wouldn't talk to me like at all during lessons. So I had to find a way to like get talk going, because you can't learn to read and write unless you're first talking. So she had that. But what happened with her is I worked hard, and by the end of February, when we did our discontinuing testing or our testing screening, she was a level 8. Okay, so that's like mid-year, wasn't terribly off, but we wanted her to be higher than that. So then I had to think about, okay, so what's next for her? So I'm thinking about her path. Now, one thing that always comes to my mind is a friend of mine who had a child who, at 3 years old, someone said, well, he has apraxia. And she said it was a 15-minute observation, and the person who was telling her that, she said, I don't think the person knew like how it rocked my world. Like, I heard that word, and all of a sudden my future was different with my child. So I think about her story, and he did get speech and language, and he did have some needs, but like it was in the moment of how that came out, the need. I think about that with all students I work with, and just I want to have this hopeful stance always of the students I work with. Just because I see those struggles doesn't mean right now that I need to talk to the parents or those kinds of things. And I know you guys all know you're doing everything you can to move students forward. But I wanted that piece, and thinking about this story, which I want to continue to share with you. So we screened her. I worked with her for 20 weeks. She got to a level 8. And then on the next slide, I want to show you kind of what the rest of her story was. Now, the fact is, I left that school after first grade. So all I know for sure about what happened after that is that the first grade teacher picked up the reins and did Guided Reading Plus with her. Okay. So by the end of first grade, she did reach a level 12. So we went from an 8 to a 12, which wasn't quite benchmark, but still progress. She'd gotten a foundation. Then she went to second grade, and I can't tell you the specifics of what happened, but I know there was intentional conversations, going on about how to continue her story and see how we can get her to a place. So they got to the level 24 by second grade. But then you see by third grade, she got to grade level 38. And then really by fifth grade, she exceeded it. So, I mean, this is a child who has had ESL who wouldn't talk at all to me, at the first part of our lessons. So I think of her story a lot. I think of how frustrated I was working with her, and how there were a lot of things that I had presumptions about, and how that was something I wanted to give up on, because how hard I worked with her, got to a level 8. But then I think of this story, and it makes me be hopeful for all of the children that I have that come across. I have one actually right now who in the first 3 weeks, I was using some deficit language. I was going, I can't do it. I don't know why he's not growing. I have tried this, and I can't figure out why he's not moving. Well, all of a sudden, we're in week 6. Something has come together for him. There's still a lot of confusions, but something was coming together. His teacher just said, did you sprinkle the magic fairy dust? And I said, no, we all did, because this isn't me. This is the speech and language teacher. This is you, and this is me, all working together to try and make this child moving. But now I'm more hopeful. I'm like, okay, so I'm seeing something, but I was ready to give up 3 weeks ago. So, all right, so then moving forward, I want you to think about, Franklin has stories too. And I have access, I'll let you hand them out. I I have access because we put all of our data for reading recovery in a database that is it's called IDEC, and they do lots of different things with the data to help us think about growth of students over time. So with Jana and Karen, we kind of talked about how can we look at the students that you guys have worked with. All right, so what we have, what she's handing out to you right now is last year's reading recovery end of the year data. And the purpose in looking at this is to kind of think about the stories of students at Franklin, okay? We have, I'm gonna look at one of them with you so you can kind of see how this looks. One of them is a writing graph and one of them is a text level graph, okay? And it comes from the screening, the test that Karen and Jana give the kids. So what you're seeing there is the beginning of 2017. So we don't have the data for this year's kids. So this is just last year's. You're seeing the beginning of 2017 and then the end of 2017. These are all of the kids that Karen and Jana worked with last year. So what we want to look at is their stories from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So if we take a look at, let's look at one of them together. Okay, so if we look at student number 10.
Do you have some extra that I can speak? Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
If you look at student number 10 and on the top of the chart, look at text, the text level growth, okay? So student number 10 came in at the beginning of the year at a level 2, okay? Which would be like mid-kindergarten level, right? Then mid-year, and I'm assuming this was a child that they picked up. I don't have that information right here, right now, but was at a level 5. So it was hard for that child in first grade, the first semester. It was hard for them. And if we had a name there, I'm sure the first grade teacher could say it was hard. And these are all the things that were hard for him, you know? But then I want to show you, because this is a typical like reading recovery student by the end of the year with that intensive work with reading recovery and the classroom teacher and whatever other special supports they had, the child went beyond, okay? So that's what we hope to see,
That was a second.
right? That was a second rounder? Okay. So that's what you would hope to see, is you have a child struggling, we get that intervention and they go to 20. My guess is that child's story in second grade is continuing as a positive story, okay? If you look at the writing part for him, or her, I don't know, 10, they came in with 13 words mid-year. So there was some great work the first grade teacher did with them to get them to 34 words. And then by the end of the year, they could write 62 words in 10 minutes, okay? So that's like a story we want to see, right? Obviously, the best story would be they were there from the beginning of the time. All right, so now what I want you to do is you can do this with a neighbor, but just chat a little bit, pick another student, pick and look at some different growth patterns that you see. Thinking about what's going on with the child and any other assumptions or things that you're thinking about what's going on. So just have a little bit of conversation together about that. And then we'll share out any of your thinking in a couple minutes, okay? Oh, I have to say one more thing.
Who they are.
I know, we
makes a
debated
difference
about
when
the
you know,
names.
Well, it'd be nice to know from second grade teachers now how they're doing.
Right, it would. We debated about that, like, but we just really wanted to see the stories. Like just so you know,
I'm surprised they're
on
looking
4,
at the
8, and
idea.
11, it says 0.25. I had to do that so blue showed up, but really they were just 0. They came in at a 0.
And some kids there's no fall data for because they were a 4, so we didn't
didn't
test
test
them.
Yeah.
But then
When you look at these end of the year scores, I'm surprised at how many have made benchmark or are above or very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's only a handful, 1, 2, 3, 4 who didn't make the end of the year benchmarks. I mean, that's really good. And these are the lowest,
These are the trickiest kids.
the
Yeah,
hardest ones. you
Yep.
know?
yeah.
That's awesome, really.
So, and I,
Good job.
there are some kids who struggled a little more, and you can see those too, right? You can see like 8 and 7, even 12.
Yeah,
Mhm.
15.
But when you look at where they landed at the end of the year, it's still, there's still holes. Like even this little guy that I'm working with right now, I said to his teacher, I'm excited, but I know there's still a lot of work to do. Like there are still some things that are very confusing. And that doesn't just go away because these children all have these different paths that we are looking at.
Right, and then you have to look at the reading and look at the writing because they're reciprocal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So even looking at 7, that went backwards from mid-year to end of year. But then, there's probably lots of layers there too. Like what's that about? And layers to me just mean like, okay, who needs to sit down around thinking through like what this is about and how we hit the mark with them. A little boy that I worked with at the beginning of the year beginning of the year ended in January with me at a 3. Okay, so he's got some significant things going on. So we just had our 3rd meeting on him. And I'm not working with him anymore. Another person is working with him. And so we had to talk about how do we tweak because he's shutting down. Like he doesn't want to do this part anymore. How do we tweak that and move forward? Eventually, if he's not making the games, then we'd have to look at more. Okay, but right now we're not willing to like throw in the towel yet. So he's still a 1st grader. Okay, so any other comments or thoughts as you look at this? My wondering is, when you look at these people, I would like to know in 5th grade what the story ended up being. And that's
we do that as part of our recovery report that we do
Yeah.
every year. We do look at how the kids do through the grades and how we use DRA and forward exam. DRA especially to look at where are they at in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Long term.
And that's how I got the information
That's
about.
one of our team meetings.
Yeah.
Because
For
some of
some
them
of
would
our
be
kids.
kids that some of us would have had.
The thing that has caused
It's
them
very
to be
knowledge.
in that is environmental. And so we really need to give
Yep.
them all we got.
That's a
Because that
definite
environment
piece.
doesn't change.
Right. And honestly, in all the districts I work with, that environment is a piece of the puzzle.
I feel like it's a huge piece for a lot of them.
Yeah, and we can
Working
do what we
through
can
that.
do here. That's all we have control over is what we can do here. So we just keep on working at it. That's for sure. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that because it's just thinking about your group of kids. That's what you guys have impact on. And so we want to keep thinking about how do we raise our expertise and our responsiveness to these kids so we can continue their stories in that positive trajectory. So moving forward then, we started our talk originally discussing about how different schools have different systems in place. And when you think about the schools here, or the stories that you have here, I'm sure that your goals are the same as in other schools. And what's different is the students, the teachers, and I was telling you about that. What I've noticed, and I have no research on this, just books I've read and observations really, is that asset versus that deficit philosophy of moving kids forward. And I know that you guys are all, the fact that you come to acquisitions class and you're learners, we're working on having that asset language even. So we're going to take a look at that in just a minute. I don't know if any of you have seen this book. It's one that I got at the beginning of this year, I think. It's called Kids First from Day One. And what I liked in here is that she gives a foundation, 4 foundational things that when schools pay attention to these things, it helps us to have better outcomes. This is Christine Hertz and Christine Mraz. So if you go to the next slide, Jana, these are 4 things that she said are important. Okay, so when you're thinking about the stories of these kids, these at the end of our time, in a few minutes, 20 minutes, you'll have a little time to do some reflecting and thinking about like where do you fit into these kinds of things within your school system here. So the first one being that asset language to prompt hopeful mindset. The second one being how responsive and intentional we are in our teaching. The third one being that those clear teaching structures that we have in place for us. And then, it's responsive and intentional curriculum, and then it's responsive teachers. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, in the book she says we don't really ever want to hope for perfection, and I don't think any of us do. If we do, then we're not in the right profession because this is not a perfect world. But we want to plan for growth, okay? And if you go to the next slide, Dana, I'm kind of going a little bit quicker. So if you, I'm going to have us click on where it says asset versus deficit on the top. This is common language that actually I've probably said these things a few times and I've heard, okay? So when we think of common language that sometimes we can get caught up in versus language that helps us have that hopeful mindset forward, I just want to have us explore this a little bit because, as I said, I was here with the student that I'm working with right now. And I had, as soon as I started changing to this, I think I'm looking at things more hopefully. So he is so hard to work with, okay? I've said it. Instead, could we say, what else could I try to meet the needs of this child? And who might help me? Who could I sit down with? Maybe it's my colleague. Maybe it's our special ed folks who know more about this child. Maybe it's our EL teacher. Maybe it's our literacy coach, any of that. So instead of he's so hard to work with and stopping, I want to say, who else can help me meet the needs of the child? I have no time to get everything I need to do. I'm sure none of you have ever said that because I have said it a million times. Instead, what can I do in the time I have that will be most effective? It just makes us feel better if we can say that. Because honestly, nobody has enough time. None of us do, ever. It's just the way the world goes. But if I can think about this 30 minutes in this slot of time that I have with this group or this individual or this large group, how can I be the most effective? It just changes my tune a little bit. Instead of hoping or thinking about what I have that's not going right, what I can do to make it right. This one, I've done everything I can to meet the needs of this child and he isn't growing. I've said that also. In fact, that's what I was saying to the speech and language teacher about this child I just was working with. I've done this and this and this. I can't see any growth. What else can I do? Well, I did say what else could I do with her, but who could I collaborate with to reflect on why things aren't working and discuss what else I can try? I'm dealing with so many behaviors that I can't get to academics. Okay, so these are things I've heard in a million schools from a million different teachers. And it's true. These are all true things. They all are things we deal with. It's just a matter of how we're going to set our mind on it. So if we do this instead, what behavior right now is most getting in the way? What can I do to meet that child's social emotional piece? Or is he need something different right now because it's too much for him? Okay. So let's just do a little bit of something. Choose one of these. The student is so low. They've lost so much over summer. He isn't understanding anything he reads. Choose one of those and then work with a partner. See if you can find an asset language to change it to. Okay? I don't care which one you choose, but talk with someone next to you and see if you can find some asset language to change one of these deficit languages. Okay?
I'm done with that.
That's a way with words. I'm not going to compete with that.
Yeah, it said the student has a lot of opportunity for growth.
Okay. All right. Yeah. See? That just feels better.
Yeah, so we're like starting small.
Yeah.
Starting one small piece. It's really calm today.
Okay. Did you guys are you working on it or did you come up with something? Okay, throw some out. I just like to hear these hopeful asset language. Okay, so did anybody do the student is so low? Okay, what did you have?
Student has a lot of opportunity for growth.
A lot of opportunity for growth, and here's the first thing I'm going to start with. Okay, all right. How about they've lost so much over summer?
What was the teacher last year doing with the students? Get them where they need to be, what can I do with them to help?
Yeah, where were they at the end of the year? How can I expand on that? Great. How about he isn't understanding anything he reads?
What are the strengths?
Okay, what can he do? What does he understand?
And where is his biggest weakness that I can support and help?
Nice, nice. I always think I have a trainer, so I'm a teacher leader, but then I have a teacher trainer who's like in charge of me, and she constantly reframes my language. And it's always this asset language. And yet is a big word she uses. I mean, you throw yet into anything and you're moving more towards asset language, right? So you get the point of that. So I'm just referring to this as one of the foundations that helps us make a system change towards asset-minded language. Okay. All right. So then, do you know how to get back? Okay. So the next foundation is that responsive, intentional curriculum. So, like in the beginning, I discussed how important it is to know the what and the how, but then also the why of curriculum. So when you think about different pieces of the curriculum that you need to teach, like in kindergarten, we teach clapping syllables, right? Okay. So probably in the phonics curriculum, it says we need to do that. And we might even know how to do that because we usually use their names, right? Use their names to clap the syllables. My question is, do you know why they're doing that? Why do we want kids to clap syllables? How is it helpful to them in literacy? Say it again.
To see word parts.
To see word parts?
Or hear the word parts.
Hear word
To
parts.
break words.
Yeah. So that's the first part of it. It's about hearing units because we want them to do one-to-one. That's how it affects reading, okay? They clap syllables because then when they get to reading and they're pointing to words, we want them to be able to stop because they know they can hear these units. It has more than one, like hippopotamus, That's the first part. But then did you know that it's actually setting them up for more in reading and writing? It sets them up for once they really start to problem solve as a reader and a writer, they can see parts, show yourself the first part, show yourself the last part, or clap that word, write the first part, write the next part, write the next part. So when we set them up the foundation for clapping syllables, it's really not just so that they can practice their clapping at all, or that they can play with their friends' names. It's really a foundation for something more. So knowing the why might help you even think about it as you're teaching it a little differently. Okay? All right, so what I did was, we have 10 minutes left, so let's see how much time we have. I want to give you at least 5 minutes at the end for reflection, so we're going to go a little fast through this. I was going to have you brainstorm a little bit, but I'm just going to throw it out there and you can think about it on your own. So kindergarten, you might think of the whys behind concepts about print activities. Okay, what does that help them with? First grade, you might think about why word walls? Okay, what is the usefulness of that? How does that help a student be a reader and writer? Second grade, you might think about writing, thinking journals. Why thinking journals? What is the usefulness of that? So I'm just putting that out there because these are all things that they're all the what's that we have as part of our literacy. But are we thinking about the why? I am a huge person that needs to know the why because I don't like to waste time ever. I want to know why I'm doing what I'm doing so that I can be putting it out in the best possible way. Okay, so just I would challenge you to just take one thing that you're teaching, it's part of the curriculum, and think about, okay, so how does this help a child be a better reader and a writer? Okay, what's the usefulness of it? Okay, all right, so then thinking about the responsiveness of teachers. It isn't, when we think about differentiation, we're thinking about, like, I was a special ed teacher, so I think about differentiation differently now than I did then. Back then I thought about it as like, okay, I'm going to modify the assignment. I'm going to maybe make it easier. I'm going to maybe change the book. I'm going to, I'm going to differentiate that way. But differentiation is about zone of proximal development. Are you guys familiar with that term? Those of you who took acquisitions, I know are. It's about scaffolding, not rescuing. Those people who took acquisition probably are familiar with that as well, because we talked a lot about how when we are differentiating for a child, each child needs it broken down, not each child, but some children need it broken down in a different way sometimes. So the whole part about I'm going to teach them something, and then I'm going to maybe just prompt to see, but if I never allow and get them to an independent place with it, have they really learned it? Okay, so I often ask the reading recovery teachers I work with, if the child is reading and they keep looking at you, that means that you're helping them too much, okay? You might want to say, well, what could you try? And just put it out there, because you're going to see what they've taken on from what you've taught them, okay? If I say, what can you try? And they still sit there, that means they're still too reliant on me. So I could do a whole thing on this, but I want to be able to teach something and then say, could you try this or this? See if they'll try it. And then I want to get them to a place where they are not stopping and they're initiating like some different attempts as a problem solver in reading, writing, math, anything. Okay? It's that differentiation means, what can the student do independently? What is it I'm really asking them to do? What do they know how to do that will help with unknown? What scaffolds are most helpful? When am I knowing it's working? And how do I begin to remove the scaffold so that they can do it independently? Okay? All right. So, good. We got to the end. I felt like I was talking really fast. So basically, when we're thinking about, I went really fast with all of those things, but when we're thinking about like those 4 foundational things that she talked about asset language, she talked about responsive curriculum, responsive teachers, and then that last one being structure, like the structures that are in place, knowing the what, the why, the how. Okay, we can't change the direction of the wind. We can't change what's happening at home. We can't change the trauma children have. We can't change that they're absent all the time. We can't change any of those things. What we can just change is what we have control over right here, right now with these students at this time. So we can adjust our sales sometimes. If this isn't working, I can adjust it this way. So when you think about the stories of the kids in Franklin and you think about your input into it, I want you to just like reflect on what is something that you can be more mindful of. Okay, so like Jana was saying, let's have a little bit of reflection from this, because I think they're going to use some of this maybe moving forward in their title or in their reading recovery plan or in team meetings or whatever. So when you're thinking about what I just really quickly talked through, what are you most thinking about right now in regards to your place in this system at Franklin? Okay, is it asset language? Is it possible student stories and your impact on that? Is it building strong foundations for K2 literacy, being like how responsive, intentional the curriculum? Are you knowing the whys behind what you're doing? Is it knowing clear teaching structures or your responsiveness as a teacher? So if you get a piece of paper or on your Chromebook or something, because I don't know do you want these or they're just going to reflect on their own or?
Either way.
Well, do you? Okay, if you want to share
I
it,
just want to reflect. That's
okay, you can just reflect. You can just reflect. So, what is it you're most thinking about right now? And then, what might be a goal thinking? Like, I know it's hard to change stream right now, and you're all super busy. But what would be a goal that you might have for yourself to make a bigger impact on the system at Franklin for higher outcomes? Because we're all working towards that. Okay, so take about 5 minutes to do that. We have 5 minutes left, and then we're done. Okay. And if you have any questions, I am available. Thanks.